Hello, and thank you for joining me for this little audiovisual sidebar to accompany my article, The Tintinnabulation That So Musically Wells Tinnitus and Massage Therapy. For this, I was able to snag a few minutes with my friend Till Luca, who was driving home from a long vacation, and he pulled off the highway and took a call with me in his camper. So I want to offer a special thanks to Till, and I hope that you enjoy this conversation about manual therapies for clients who have tinnitus. Hi, Till. Thank you so much for joining me today. Before we begin, do you want to give us the 10-second description of who you are and why we should listen to you?
I don't know why you should listen to me. And I'm always asking who I am. What do I do? I am a bodywork practitioner who writes and teaches and thinks and broadcasts and travels around in my camper. And I was so glad you asked me to jump on the Zoom call here in my camper. So I'm looking forward to whatever it is we're talking about.
Well, we are talking about tinnitus, and one of the reasons I wanted to connect with you on this is that your name came up in a social media discussion of who does manual therapies with tinnitus and what kinds of responses or reactions do they get. And you and I have already had a brief conversation about this, but I thought this would be a time to revisit that a little bit, because what you and I came up with, which was before I wrote the article, ended up being very resonant with the things that I found and wrote about. So
Cool.
can you tell me a little bit about your experiences of working with people who have tinnitus?
Yeah, it was like a lot of symptoms where I had some early success in my, I started young, I was in my 20s. So that's the age of being cocky. So early successes was like, oh yeah, I know about tinnitus. I
You
can
can
help with
fix
that.
tinnitus. Yeah.
Right. And pretty soon there were people I couldn't help, no matter, how determined I was to do the same thing that had worked for other people. So it did is one of those symptoms that really propelled me into some kind of humility, but also really starting to learn about the variety of different people's experiences too. There's tinnitus. I think I mentioned to you, I think of tinnitus as a symptom more than a condition. There's something else going on, and there's so many things that could be causing it, that to think that we could just pull on the ear in some magic way and it would help everybody's tinnitus would be really nice.
It would, wouldn't it, if you could
Yeah.
just. And now, because I've been doing all this research, my ad feeds are full of, here's what doctors won't tell you about tinnitus. It's
Yeah,
all that
right. Right,
all
right.
that kind of funny stuff. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about what you were doing in your 20s that made you, gave you the sense that you had some kind of impact on this?
Yeah, no, and I still do that, and I still have an impact on people. It's just, like I said, with a dose of humility in there. And then there's other things I do now that I didn't do then. But one of the basic manual therapy interventions that seem to help some people are thinking about the jaw, thinking about head, neck adaptability and ease. And then really specifically, you can do some things with the ear,
Mhm.
actually pulling
You
on the
talked a
ear.
little bit about pulling on the pinna,
Yeah,
and
pinna and concha, getting deep down in these different fun parts of the ear and finding different directions. Right. This feels so good. Directions of traction or even gentle twisting, the headmaster technique.
if it
With,
doesn't hurt, though.
well, no, we're not wanting to hurt anyone at all, because what you can find is that sometimes it's immediate. Sometimes you'll find a direction where someone will go, whoa, my tinnitus just went down to half the level in that ear, or whatever. So that's, in those cases, who knows what it is, if it's just the sensation inhibiting some experience in the brain, or if it's a mechanical effect on the auditory nervous structures. But there's things we can do that can help some people turn down that.
Turn down the volume.
Yeah.
Which is a phrase that's used a lot in the context of chronic pain. And there are some
Yeah.
really, really good analogies between tinnitus and chronic pain, in the sense that
Yeah.
this is, it's described as an oral hallucination. You may have started with a thing, and
Yeah.
then the brain just ingrains it, and then it becomes a self-sustaining
Yeah.
phenomenon.
Yeah. I remember the first time I heard pain hallucination. It was like, what? I was
Yeah.
like mind blowing. But like the idea that pain can be a quote hallucination, not related to external stimulus, but something generated in ourselves. But yeah, tinnitus is like that too. And I think a lot of, I mean, some of this was embedded in the way many of us were working, but as we've really articulated and crystallized how we're using the biopsychosocial perspectives, that's really helped with tinnitus too. I mean, there's a lot of that really does apply.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I agree completely. And that makes me think of the population that kept turning up in my researches about um, military personnel who are just kneecapped by this. I mean, just really, really sidelined by the fact that this hallucination has
All
taken
right.
over their experience of life. And so what that actually makes a nice lead in to the next point, because another thing that we talked about before is maybe shifting some goals
Yeah.
um, with body
Yeah.
work. So can you talk to me about that?
All right. Of course, I mean, like pain, very analogous. Everybody wants to turn down their volume on their tinnitus too. Everyone wants less sound, and they're searching sometimes desperately because it can be really debilitating. It can be really exhausting, get in the way of your sleep, get away your focus, everything. Everyone's looking for a way to make the sound less. Sometimes we can help. And there's many other kind of multifactorial things people can look at and try and, consult with to do experimentation to see what helps turn down the volume. Then the times that we don't seem to be able to turn down the volume, or when it's not enough just to give total relief, the goals need to switch. And that's when it gets really interesting to me. That's when it would get really discouraging for me as like a 10-year practitioner. It's like, oh,
Mhm.
geez, I'm trying all my tricks and nothing's working. Oh, geez. But now, like at about, I think it's probably just not too long after that, 15, 20 years in, I'm like, oh, those are the ones that get really interesting because then I have to get creative and adaptable. And my goal at that point becomes if I can't affect the volume of the tinnitus, can I affect the disturbance factor? Can I just affect the amount that is disturbing or upsetting that person?
Okay, so we're back to sometimes this is called bothersomeness,
Okay.
right? So it's
Like,
not making the tinnitus go away, it's just making it a smaller sort of problem.
yeah. And if you think about it, there's so many things that are like this when the thing itself is what we target. But really, what we want to shift is how irritating or bothersome or debilitating it is for the person.
Right.
And there's a lot we can do around that and from many different angles. Shall I
Yeah,
name a few?
just by adding a joyful part of somebody's week.
Yeah, there you go. There's a
Yeah,
big one, but
yeah,
also a joyful part of their body.
right.
There's like sometimes the thing that really helps someone find their tinnitus less disturbing is an amazing foot session.
Yeah.
Just a really amazing foot massage can do a lot to reduce the bothersomeness of that whining in the ear. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, I'm not, it sounds trite and sounds simplistic, but that's huge. If
And
you can
it's,
find
so
somebody who's
simplistic things
enjoying,
are often the most sophisticated, aren't they?
that's right.
So, and this connects nicely with the fact that, the two most commonly used and to date most successful interventions for tinnitus are, devices or appliances that try to mitigate what people are sensing in their ears, and cognitive behavioral therapy, which is
Like you're talking
really,
about hearing aids
well,
in the first
hearing
place?
aids or sound machines that incorporate music that hits the tone of the
Yeah, yeah,
tinnitus that the person experiences.
yeah,
There's a gazillion apps
right.
for, just putting on your phone. There's all kinds of devices and mechanisms, but that's really focused on your ears.
Right.
But the other intervention and only other intervention that consistently gets a positive effect on quality of life
Uh,
is cognitive behavioral therapy, which is really about figuring out good coping mechanisms, right? And
yeah, and reframing.
finding thought patterns and reframing thought patterns in a way that allows you to have quality of life, even though there's
Absolutely
this problem.
huge.
Yeah.
I mean, I asked after we talked the other day, I asked my wife about it because she suffers from it. She's a pretty long-term sufferer from it. So I've gotten a lot of clinical practice working with her and found ways to relieve it and found the limits of my ability there. But I said, so what helps you? She said, well, hearing aids.
Mm-hmm.
For her, I told you that story. She really noticed a big difference in her severity of her tinnitus when she got the hearing aids that were tuned for her particular hearing loss.
Right.
And there's a chicken and egg relationship there that's kind of complicated, but a lot of people, not everybody, get help by getting their hearing checked out.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing she said is, it was really, she said, Till, it's this stuff you do with pain. I learned how to think about it differently. And she said, I read somewhere, I don't remember where, some Native American idea of ringing in the ears, that it was the voice of the gods talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I just started working with that. She said, I thought, like, how is this different than just the sound of a brook, which I like? What if I just listen to it? What if I just listen
And
to
try
it?
to have a not, at least a not negative affect about it.
Try to have a not negative affect, right? But it's like it's a little like trying to relax, but it's the same thing. Like, what if we just totally shift the way I'm explaining it to myself?
Right.
Oh, I mean, cognitive behavioral therapy is probably out of our scope as manual therapists for most of us, but we can ask questions like, how do you think about this? What is going on that's making that noise? Are there any other possible explanations?
Well, cognitive behavioral therapy is outside our scope of practice. There are communication styles
Yeah.
that incorporate the principles, and motivational interviewing is part of that. And
Yeah.
there are some other guidelines that again help us to reframe the way we talk to people, so it's less about, oh, how awful, you have this debilitating problem,
Right.
and
Right.
to something that is, let's focus on something else, like how good your feet can feel, or
Yeah.
what if your tinnitus was there but less of a problem for you. I mean, there are all kinds of ways we can
Yeah. And
incorporate
even,
what it is.
right. And maybe it's even, there's some, very involved ways to do that, CVT or motivational interviewing. There's some really simple ways just to bring in that kind of spirit, which is partly just to shift our own thinking of it
Mm-hmm.
and not to fall into the trap of just trying to turn down the volume. Because that's what they want. And that's what we want for them too. And yet, if all of everything we do is about that, and then we check and say, how is it now? And they sit up, well, it's still ringing. We've just invalidated everything that might have happened.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, so what if we let go for a second of trying to turn it down, since nothing has really seemed to help for a long term? What if we work instead about what it's like to have ringing in your ears and how maybe you could relax around that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does it sound like? Describe it to me. Sometimes just our curiosity is enough too to shift it. Never mind, modalities like motivational interviewing or anything. Just being curious
Mm-hmm.
and really shift someone's relationship to a symptom.
Right.
Themselves.
Right.
The
Okay.
third thing,
Well,
one more.
yeah.
The third thing Loretta said, distraction.
Uh-huh.
Or she said distraction. Then she said, well, actually, it's not focusing on it. She said, because I can really lie there in bed at night and go, oh my God, there's my tinnitus. It's driving me nuts. I can't get away from it. Or she can say, okay, listen to the brook, listen to the wind, whatever that sound is, just listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
So distraction, sometimes doing something else, getting the foot massage. Sometimes the distraction is from the habitual mental loops about what it means and what's going on.
Right.
Breaking those cycles.
Right. Nice. Well, thanks to Loretta.
Thank you, Loretta.
And thank you for pulling off the highway and taking a few minutes to talk with me about your experiences with tinnitus. I think your history and your humility about this is a great model for anyone who wants to be helpful to clients who are living with this problem.
We're just companions, They want to fix, they want to help. We all want to fix them, but really the best sometimes we can do is just keep people company while we figure this all out.
I like that. All right. Thank you, Till. Take care. Safe driving.
See you later.
Okay.